My name is Corinne Andrews. I'm 28. I woke up from a 3-week coma to an empty hospital room. No father, no brothers, no flowers, no cards, no half-eaten bag of chips on the visitor chair. Nothing. Just a single sheet of heavy stationery on my bedside table, watermarked, printed with Andrews Residence, Greenwich, Connecticut at the top. My father's handwriting underneath. Corinne, we've decided to stop covering your medical expenses. Your brothers agree it's time you handle things on your own. Good luck. Dad. I read it 4 times, then I cried for an hour. But my father made one mistake. He forgot what my mother left behind. And he definitely forgot about the man in the gray suit who walked into my room on day 3. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to the house I grew up in, and the family that taught me silence was the same thing as love. I'm an ICU nurse. Night shift, 12 hours on, 12 off, at a mid-size hospital in Stamford, Connecticut. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a radiator that clanks at 2 a.m. I pay my own rent. I buy my own groceries. I drive a 9-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door that I never got fixed because there was always something more important. A power bill, a new pair of work shoes, another month's student loan payment. The Andrews family lives 26 minutes away, but it might as well be another planet. My father's house, the house I grew up in, is a 5-bedroom colonial in Greenwich. Stone facade, wrought iron gate, heated pool in the back, a 3-car garage where his Range Rover sits next to my stepmother's Mercedes and my brother Preston's BMW. The dining table is walnut, custom-made, seats 12. Every Sunday, Diane sets 4 places. Harold at the head, Diane to his right, Preston across from her, sometimes Grant, my younger brother, if he's in town. There was never a 5th chair. I stopped being surprised by that years ago. You can only show up uninvited to your own family's dinner so many times before you get the message. The last time I tried, Diane smiled at me from the doorway and said, "Oh, Corinne, we didn't expect you. Let me see if we have enough." There were 2 untouched ribeye steaks on the counter behind her. My father didn't look up from his phone. That was 3 years ago. After that, I just stopped. Stopped calling on Sundays. Stopped driving to Greenwich. Stopped pretending that if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, they'd eventually make room. But I should explain why I was always the one trying. Why I spent 16 years believing I owed them something. For that, I need to go back to when I was 12. My mother's name was Margaret Ellis Andrews. She was warm in the way that doesn't announce itself, the kind of person who'd leave notes in your lunchbox and remember exactly how you liked your eggs. She came from money, the Ellis side, though she never talked about it. What I remember most is her hands on the piano keys, teaching me scales on Saturday mornings, and the Cartier watch she always wore, thin gold band, a gift from my grandmother Eleanor. She never took it off. On March 7th, I had a piano recital at school. A small thing, 12 kids in a gymnasium. But I'd practiced for weeks. My father said he'd pick me up at 8:30. He didn't come. I waited in the school lobby for 45 minutes, calling his cell, voicemail every time. Finally, I called my mother. She'd already been home for hours, thought everything was handled. She didn't hesitate. "Stay inside, baby. I'm coming." It was raining, not drizzling, pouring, the kind of Connecticut March storm that turns roads into rivers. My mother drove her sedan out into it because her 12-year-old was standing alone in a school lobby and her husband wouldn't answer his phone. She never made it. A pickup truck hydroplaned through a red light on Route 106. The impact was on the driver's side. She was pronounced dead at Stamford Hospital at 9:47 p.m. My father arrived at the hospital an hour later. I was sitting in a plastic chair in the hallway, still wearing my recital dress, holding a paper cup of water a nurse had given me. He stood over me. He didn't kneel, he didn't hold me. He said, "Your mother drove out in that storm because of you." My grandmother Eleanor held me at the funeral 3 days later and whispered, "Your mother made sure you'd be taken care of." I didn't understand what she meant. I was 12, and I'd just learned that love could be a thing you get punished for needing. Diane Mercer entered our lives 2 years later. She was polished in a way my mother never tried to be. Blowout every Thursday, Chanel flats, a smile that arrived half a second before her eyes caught up. She brought gifts the first time she came to dinner. A cashmere scarf for me, a leather wallet for Grant. She called me sweetie, and told me I had my mother's cheekbones. Within 6 months, she'd moved in. Within a year, she and my father were married. Within 2, everything that had been my mother's was gone. It happened in pieces, so slowly I didn't notice until it was done. First the photos. Margaret's portrait over the fireplace replaced by a landscape Diane picked up in Nantucket. Then the piano. We need the space for Preston's office, sweetie. You understand. Then my bedroom. One afternoon I came home from school and my things had been moved to the attic room on the 3rd floor. Diane said it would be more private for me. The room had a sloped ceiling and no closet. Preston was her son from a previous marriage, 4 years older than me, already in college when Diane married my father. But Harold treated him like the firstborn he'd always wanted. Preston's going to take over the business someday, he'd say at dinners. Preston understands how the world works. The family Christmas card that year had 4 people in it. I was at a friend's house when they took the photo. No one told me. I asked my father once, I was maybe 15, whether my mother had left any papers, any documents, anything. He set down his fork, looked at me with that flat, steady gaze that could make a boardroom go silent. Your mother didn't leave anything, Corinne. She left debt. I cleaned it up. Don't bring her up again. You've done enough. So I didn't. 16 years. That's how long I carried that sentence in my chest like a stone I couldn't cough up. Your mother drove out in that storm because of you. It shaped everything. Why I didn't fight for my bedroom, why I didn't push back when the piano disappeared, why I turned down the partial scholarship to nursing school and went to a cheaper program instead, because my father said, nursing is fine for someone with your limitations. Don't waste resources. I believed him. I believed all of it. Because when you're told at 12 that you caused the worst thing that ever happened to your family, you spend the rest of your life trying to make it right. You don't set boundaries, you don't ask questions, you say yes, sir, and thank you, and you take whatever scraps of attention they toss your way, and you convince yourself that's what love looks like. That was my life until March 14th of this year. I was driving home after a 12-hour ICU shift. It was almost midnight. I was tired. The kind of tired that lives behind your eyes. And I didn't see the box truck run the red light on Elm Street until it was already filling my windshield. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the ambulance. I'm told my heart stopped once in the ER and they brought me back. I'm told my father was called. He was still listed as my emergency contact, a detail I'd never updated because some part of me still believed he'd come. He came once. Week 1. Grant told me later that Harold stood in the doorway, looked at the machines I was hooked to, and said, "This is going to be expensive." Then he left. Week 2, only Grant visited. Week 3, no one. And then I woke up to that note. But here's the thing. A week before the accident, while packing a box of old things from my apartment closet, I'd found something. A torn envelope at the bottom of a carton I'd taken from the Greenwich attic years ago. It had my name on it, my old address at the estate, and a logo I didn't recognize. Some bank or financial firm. The letter inside was gone. Just the envelope, ripped open and empty. I tossed it aside, figured it was junk mail. I wish I'd looked closer. I need you to understand what it's like to wake up from a coma. It's not like the movies. There's no dramatic eye-opening, no gasping breath while loved ones clutch your hand. It's slow, foggy. My throat was raw from the intubation tube. My left wrist was in a cast. Every joint in my body felt like it had been filled with wet sand. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed, and for a long time, that was the only sound. No voices, no footsteps, no one saying she's awake. I turned my head, slowly, because even that hurt, and saw the room. Empty visitor chair. A wilted arrangement of carnations on the windowsill, the kind the hospital gift shop sells for $12. The cellophane was dusty. No one had touched it in days. Then I saw the note. I read it the way you read something that can't possibly be real. We've decided to stop covering your medical expenses. Your brothers agree it's time you handle things on your own. Good luck, Dad. Heavy cream stationery with the Andrews family letterhead embossed at the top. My father's handwriting, precise, slanted slightly left, the same hand that used to sign my report cards without reading them. I pressed the nurse call button. A woman named Linda came in, checked my vitals, and told me I'd been unconscious for 22 days. Has anyone been here? I asked. My voice sounded like gravel. She hesitated. A woman came by about a week ago, signed some discharge of responsibility paperwork, and told us to forward all future bills to you directly. She brought those flowers. Linda nodded toward the wilted carnations. She seemed in a hurry. Diane. Of course. I held that note against my chest and cried for an hour. Not because they'd left. I think some part of me always knew they would. I cried because I finally understood. They were never really there. Lying in that hospital bed, the memories came in waves. Every moment I'd swallowed my own voice to keep the peace. My nursing school graduation. I'd finished top of my cohort, clinical honors, 3 letters of recommendation from attending physicians. I'd texted my father the date and time 2 months in advance. The morning of, he replied. Something came up. Congrats. No period, no exclamation point. Grant was traveling. Diane didn't respond at all. I walked across the stage to polite applause from strangers and took a selfie in the parking lot in my cap and gown, alone, leaning against my Civic. I still have that photo. I look like I'm trying very hard to smile. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Diane hosted 20 guests at the Greenwich House. The table was set with her new Waterford crystal and fresh eucalyptus runners. She introduced Preston to everyone. This is Preston, Harold's eldest. He's in commercial real estate now. We're so proud. While I carried platters in from the kitchen. One of Harold's business partners asked who I was. My father said, That's Corinne. She helps out. Not my daughter. Not even she's a nurse. She helps out. Like the caterer. After dinner, I washed dishes for an hour while Preston showed the guests his new BMW. A gift from Dad for closing his first deal. I'd asked my father for help with a security deposit 6 months earlier. His response? Maybe if you'd chosen a real career, you wouldn't need to ask. I kept going back. Every holiday, every birthday I wasn't invited to, but showed up for anyway. Because somewhere inside me, 12-year-old Corinne was still standing in that school lobby, waiting for someone to come. And the worst part? I thought that was love. I thought that's what I deserved. 2 days after I woke up, I tried to call my family. Grant's number went straight to a message. This number is not accepting calls from this line. I stared at my phone. Blocked. My own brother's number. Blocked. I told myself maybe he'd changed phones. Maybe it was a mistake. But my hands were shaking. I called my father's cell. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? Hi, Dad, I almost died. Just checking in? I called the house. Diane picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear her heels on tile. The kitchen, probably. She sounded exactly the way she always does. Warm, measured, completely in control. Corinne? How are you feeling? We heard you were awake. I was in a coma, Diane. For 3 weeks. I almost died. A pause. Then in that voice, the one she uses when she wants you to feel like you're being unreasonable. And we're glad you're okay. We really are. But your father and I discussed this, and we think it's best for everyone if you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You're 28 years old. Most people your age don't rely on family for medical bills. You signed papers transferring my hospital debt to me while I was unconscious. We were trying to help you grow, sweetie. You can't keep leaning on your father forever. I gripped the phone so hard my cast ached. Is that what this is? Growth? Diane's voice dropped half a register. Preston's wedding is in 3 months. We have expenses. Your father has a very important deal closing. This isn't a good time for drama, Corinne. Then she added, almost as an afterthought. And I should tell you, we've let the family know that you decided to go your own way. Everyone understands. She hung up. She'd already rewritten the story. In Diane's version, I was the one who left. Let me tell you about the math. 3 weeks in the ICU, emergency surgery on my spleen, a fractured wrist, 2 cracked ribs, mild traumatic brain injury. The total bill, Before insurance, just over $187,000. My employer-sponsored plan covered a portion, but after deductibles and out-of-network charges for the specialists Harold's initial visit had authorized, back when he was still pretending to be involved, I was staring at roughly $43,000 in personal liability. My savings account had $6,200 in it. I couldn't work for at least 8 weeks. My car was totaled. The auto insurance claim was still processing. My apartment lease was up in 6 weeks, and I didn't have first and last for a new place. I was lying in a hospital bed in a gown that tied in the back, scrolling through a financial aid application on a phone with a cracked screen, and the sum total of my worldly support was a wilted bouquet from a woman who'd signed away my medical coverage while I was unconscious. I set the phone down. I looked at the ceiling, those acoustic tiles with the little holes that you count when you can't sleep. I thought about my mother, about what she would say if she could see me now. And then I thought about what my father had told me for 16 years. That she left nothing. That she left debt. That I was the reason she was gone. I picked up that note from my nightstand, read it one more time. Good luck. I folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer, and said, out loud, to no one, enough. I didn't know what came next, but I was done earning their love. I was 28 years old, and I was done. That was Tuesday. On Thursday, a man I'd never seen before knocked on my hospital room door. Before I get to the man at the door, I need to tell you what Harold was doing while I was calculating how to survive. He was managing the narrative. My phone buzzed Wednesday morning with a text from my Aunt Claire, Harold's sister, who I'd seen maybe 5 times in the last decade. Corinne, I saw your dad's email. I'm really disappointed in you. After everything he's done, I didn't know what she was talking about. An hour later, a college friend named Becca forwarded me the email. She wrote at the top, "Hey, is this real? This doesn't sound like you." The email was from Harold's personal address, sent to what looked like his entire contact list. Relatives, business associates, family friends. At least 30 people. The subject line, a difficult family update. I'll spare you most of it, but the key lines burned into my retina. Corinne has, unfortunately, burned through every opportunity we've given her. She's refused to take responsibility for her life and has blamed this family for her own choices. After years of support, we've made the painful decision to step back. For her own good. And then, at the end, the sentence that made my stomach drop. Her mother would be ashamed. Her mother would be ashamed. He wrote that about me, the daughter lying in a hospital bed, and sent it to everyone we knew. Diane's contribution was subtler. A comment on the family's private Facebook group. We tried everything. Sometimes you just have to let them fall so they learn. Praying for her. Praying, with a heart emoji. Within hours, my phone was full of messages from people I barely knew, all echoing Harold's version. We're so sorry your father had to go through this. We hope you get the help you need. No one asked me what happened. They didn't need to. Harold Andrews was the patriarch, the philanthropist, the self-made man, and I was just Corinne, the difficult one. Preston called Thursday morning. I almost didn't answer. But there was a part of me, the same stupid, stubborn part that had kept going back to that house for 28 years, that thought maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he'd seen the email and realized it had gone too far. Corinne. Not hey or how are you, just my name, flat, like he was confirming a reservation. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. Dad's being generous here. He could ask you to pay back every dollar he's spent on you over the years. He's choosing not to. You should take that as the gift it is. I just woke up from a coma, Preston. And you're fine now. You're talking, you're thinking, you're fine. The point is, Diane sent you some paperwork, a release form. You sign it, you move on with your life, we move on with ours. Clean break. I'd received the documents 2 days earlier. A courier had delivered them to my hospital room, a legal-looking packet from Harold's personal attorney, requesting that I sign a voluntary waiver of any and all claims to Andrew's family assets, properties, and holdings. I'd read it twice, confused. If my mother had left nothing, if Harold had cleaned up her debt, then what exactly was I waiving? What am I giving up, Preston? Dad told me Mom left nothing. A beat of silence, then carefully. It's just a formality. Dad's reorganizing the estate for a new development deal. Some old trusts need to be cleaned up. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Old trusts. I'm not signing anything I don't understand, I said. Corinne, I said no. He hung up. I sat there holding my cracked phone, and for the first time in 16 years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt suspicious. Why does a family that claims you have nothing need your signature to prove it? Diane came in person the next day. She arrived the way she always arrives, like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. Cream cashmere coat, leather gloves, a small bouquet of white tulips. She smiled at the nurse's station, asked for my room in that honeyed voice, and I could hear them telling each other what a lovely woman as her heels clicked down the hallway. She closed the door behind her, set the tulips on the windowsill next to the dead carnations. Then she turned to face me, and the smile was gone. You're making this difficult, Corinne. I'm not signing those papers. Your father's deal closes in 6 weeks. This is the largest project of his career. If you cause problems, she smoothed her coat, choosing her words. He has relationships at every hospital in this region, board members, donors. One conversation and your little nursing career disappears. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat, delivered in the same gentle tone she used to tell me my bedroom was being moved to the attic. What am I signing away, Diane? If Mom left nothing, why does Dad need my signature? Something shifted in her face, a flicker, gone in an instant. Because the trust company won't. She stopped, pressed her lips together, then smooth as glass. Because it's just paperwork. Don't overthink it. The trust company. She heard herself say it. I saw it in her eyes, that split second of calculation, deciding whether to backtrack or plow forward. I'm not signing anything I don't understand, I said, and I'm done being scared of this family. Diane picked up her gloves, walked to the door. You were never as smart as you think you are, Corinne. That's always been your problem. She closed the door quietly. Diane never slams things. She doesn't need to. But she'd said it. Trust company. And suddenly, a torn envelope at the bottom of a moving box, and my grandmother's whisper at a funeral. They weren't random anymore. The next few days were the lowest point. My hospital bill sat on the rolling tray table like a small monument to everything I didn't have. $43,000. My bank account, $6,200. The math didn't care about my feelings. I called the billing department and arranged a payment plan, $400 a month, which I couldn't afford either, but it kept the collection calls at bay. My apartment lease was expiring. I had no car. My savings could cover maybe 6 weeks if I ate nothing but rice and eggs. The hospital social worker left pamphlets about financial assistance programs on my bed, and I filled them out at 2 a.m. with a pen that kept running out of ink. Meanwhile, the fallout from Harold's email continued. A co-worker at the hospital, someone I'd considered a friend, texted me, "Hey, I don't want to get involved, but someone said you have some issues going on. Just want you to know we're here for you." Harold hadn't directly said I had addiction problems. He'd just hinted, in that careful way of his, at choices and patterns and getting the help she needs. He knew exactly how to plant a seed without leaving fingerprints. I sat alone in that room at 3 in the morning, listening to the heart monitor down the hall and the hum of the heating system, and I thought about my mother. If you were here, I asked her silently, would you tell me to keep trying with them? Or would you tell me to run? And then another thought, clearer. I've been paying for a debt that was never mine. 16 years of apology for a storm I didn't cause. I was 28 years old, lying in a hospital bed, and I had nothing. No, that's not true. I had a question, and that question was worth everything. Grant called at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, from a number I didn't recognize. Corey. His voice was low, rushed. I'm using a friend's phone. Dad put something on my line. I don't know, some kind of family plan tracker. He'd see I called you. Grant, are you okay? Listen to me. I should have said something a long time ago, and I didn't because I'm a coward, okay? I know that. But you need to hear this. I could hear him breathing hard, like he'd been running or was trying not to cry. My little brother, 26 years old and still terrified of our father. Before Grandma Eleanor died, he said, she told me something. She said Mom left something for you. Something real. Something Dad was supposed to give you when you turned 25. He never did. My hand tightened on the phone. 25. I was 28 now. 3 years passed. What was it? I don't know the details, but I found papers in Dad's office once. In the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he keeps locked. They had a logo on them. Some kind of trust or financial company. I can't remember the exact name, but it started with Hartford or Hartwell, maybe? Something like that. My whole body went cold. The torn envelope, the logo I'd thrown away. Dad caught me looking, Grant continued, his voice dropping even lower. He grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. He said if I ever mentioned Mom's papers again, he'd cut me off completely. That's the angriest I've ever seen him, Corey. Not yelling, quiet, like ice. I heard a voice in the background. Diane's, calling Grant's name. I have to go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. The line went dead. I had a name now. A trust company. And for the first time, I had somewhere to aim. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, phone propped against my water pitcher, and Googled every variation I could think of. Hartford Trust Company, Connecticut. Hartwell Financial Trust. Trust Management, Connecticut. My hands were trembling, partly from the residual nerve damage in my left arm, partly from something else entirely. On the second page of results, I found it. Hartfield Trust and Fiduciary Services, Hartford, Connecticut. The logo matched. I was certain. That same serif typeface, the same navy and gold crest, the same logo from the torn envelope in my moving box. At 9:01 a.m. the next morning, the moment their office opened, I called. A receptionist answered. Professional, pleasant. I gave her my name. Corinne Andrews. I'm calling about a trust that may be in my name. I don't have the account number. I'm sorry, I don't really know. A pause. The sound of typing. Then her voice changed. Warmer. And something else. Concern. Ms. Andrews, please hold for 1 moment. 30 seconds of hold music. Then a man's voice, older, steady, the kind of voice that spent decades in conference rooms. Ms. Andrews, my name is Richard Calloway. I'm the managing trustee of the Margaret Ellis Andrews Irrevocable Trust. I have been trying to reach you for 3 years. I couldn't speak. We sent certified mail to your address on file, your father's residence in Greenwich, on 3 separate occasions. Each was signed for and accepted, but you never responded. I was beginning to think you didn't want to be found. Who signed for them? I whispered. A rustling of papers. The signature reads Diane Andrews, every time. The room tilted. I grabbed the bed rail. Mr. Calloway, I said, I need you to tell me everything. And he said gently, Your mother anticipated this possibility, Ms. Andrews. That's exactly why she made the trust irrevocable. 2 days later, Richard Calloway walked into my hospital room carrying a brown leather briefcase that looked older than I was. Behind him was a man I'd never seen. Younger, maybe late 40s, in a navy suit with a small silver pin on his lapel that read Hartfield Trust. He introduced himself as Thomas Whitfield, Senior Fiduciary Officer. The man in the gray suit. Well, navy, close enough. Calloway sat in the visitor chair, the first person to actually use it since I'd woken up. He opened his briefcase on the rolling tray table, moving my water cup aside with a quiet, "May I?" that contained more courtesy than my father had shown me in a decade. Miss Andrews, he began. Your mother, Margaret Ellis Andrews, established an irrevocable trust in 2008, 2 years before her death. You are the sole beneficiary. The trust was funded by your maternal grandmother, Eleanor Ellis, and contains 2 primary assets. He placed the first document on the table. A copy of the trust instrument, 46 pages, with my mother's signature at the bottom. First, an investment account currently valued at approximately $2.1 million. I stopped breathing. Second, he placed another document beside it. A property deed, stamped and recorded with the county clerk. The real property at 14 Edgewater Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut. I stared at him. That's my father's house. No, Miss Andrews, it is not. Calloway's voice was precise, not unkind. Your mother purchased that home in 2004, 2 years before she married your father, using funds from her family inheritance. A prenuptial agreement kept it as separate property. Upon her death, it transferred into the trust. Your father has been living in that house for 16 years, but he has never owned it. Thomas Whitfield placed a third item on the table. 3 certified mail receipts, each signed Diane Andrews. Your father didn't just forget about you, Corinne, Calloway said quietly. He used what was yours to build what he thinks is his. I didn't say anything for a long time. The documents sat on that hospital tray like artifacts from another life, a life where my mother was still thinking of me, still protecting me, even from the grave. The trust instrument had her handwriting in the margins, small notes to her attorney, initials in blue ink. I traced one with my fingertip. She knew, I said, and my voice cracked. She knew what he was. Calloway nodded. Your mother was a careful woman. She came to me before the marriage and said very clearly that she wanted her daughter provided for, regardless of what happened. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. I thought about my grandmother Eleanor at the funeral, leaning close, whispering, Your mother made sure you'd be taken care of. I was 12. I thought she was talking about heaven. The tears came then, not the helpless, hollow crying from the night I'd woken up, but something deeper, like a wall giving way after years of pressure. I cried because my mother had loved me enough to plan for this. I cried because my father had hated me enough to hide it. And I cried because I'd spent 16 years apologizing for existing in a house that was mine. Calloway and Whitfield waited. They didn't rush me. When I finally wiped my face with the back of my hand, the one without the cast, Calloway asked, What would you like to do? I looked at him. At the deed, the trust papers, the certified mail receipts with Diane's stolen signatures. I want what's mine, and I want him to hear it from me, not from a letter. Calloway reached into his briefcase and pulled out an ivory envelope, thick, embossed. An invitation. The Andrews Foundation Charity Gala. Harold was being honored. Then we need to talk about timing, he said. Calloway laid it out clearly, the way I imagined he laid out every case. No drama, just facts. Harold had leveraged the Greenwich property, my property, as collateral for a $4.5 million commercial development deal. He'd submitted documentation to the lender claiming ownership, but the deed was in my mother's name, transferred to the trust upon her death. Harold had never held title. What he'd done was, at minimum, a misrepresentation of asset ownership. At worst, it was mortgage fraud. The lender is First Capital Regional, Whitfield said, opening a folder with the bank's letterhead. If they discover the collateral doesn't belong to Mr. Andrews, the loan is void, the deal collapses. What do I need to do? I asked. Legally, 2 things, Calloway said. 1. We file a formal notification with First Capital that the property used as collateral is held in trust and was never available as security. 2. We petition to transfer operational control of the trust assets to you, which should have happened 3 years ago when you turned 25. He paused. Both actions are straightforward. The question is how and when. I told him I didn't want to ambush anyone. I didn't want a spectacle. But I also didn't want to do this through letters that Harold could intercept, or phone calls he could deny, or lawyers he could stall with his own lawyers for months while I slept in my car. I want the truth to be in the room where he usually lies, I said. Calloway studied me for a moment. Then he said, The gala is in 12 days. Harold is being honored. The deal is scheduled to be formally announced that evening. Representatives from First Capital will be present. He placed the property deed on top of the stack. I could see the county seal, the date, 2004, 2 years before the wedding, my mother's name in clear type. Your mother prepared the shield, Corinne. I'm simply here to make sure you know you're holding it. I was discharged on a Thursday. Grant helped, quietly, the way Grant does everything. He booked a room at a Hampton Inn in Hartford, using his own card, and texted me the confirmation number from a burner phone he'd bought at a gas station. Don't tell Dad, he said, and I didn't point out the absurdity of that sentence, that we were grown adults. hiding from our own father like runaways. The hotel room was small, clean, anonymous. A queen bed with a floral bedspread, a coffee maker with 2 packets of complimentary grounds, a window that looked out on a parking lot. It was the most peaceful place I'd been in weeks. I spent the first 3 days just healing. Walking laps around the hallway in my socks because my ribs screamed every time I took a deep breath. Eating soup from the diner next door. Sleeping 12 hours at a stretch because my body was still stitching itself back together. On the 4th day, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced. Not a speech. I'm not a speech person. Just the sentences I needed. 3, maybe 4. I said them to my reflection until they stopped shaking. Calloway had messengered me a manila folder. Inside were copies of everything. The trust instrument, the deed, the certified mail receipts, the prenuptial agreement. And one more thing I hadn't asked for. A copy of the police accident report from March 7th, 16 years ago. I held that report for 20 minutes before I opened it. My hands were trembling. I knew somehow that whatever was inside would change something fundamental, not about the money or the house, but about the story I'd been telling myself since I was 12 years old. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The gala was in 10 days. And somewhere in Greenwich, my father was rehearsing his acceptance speech, standing in a house that didn't belong to him, preparing to announce a deal built on a lie. He had no idea what was coming, but honestly, neither did I. The Andrews Foundation Charity Gala was held at the Delamar, Greenwich's most exclusive boutique hotel. I know this because the invitation Calloway had given me described it in detail. Cocktails at 6, dinner at 7:30, program at 8. Black tie preferred. Valet parking available. I arrived at 8:15. I didn't take the valet. From the lobby I could hear it. The low roar of 200 people in a ballroom, the clink of champagne flutes, a string quartet playing something tasteful and forgettable. Through the double doors I caught glimpses of the room, cathedral ceilings, crystal chandeliers casting warm circles on white tablecloths, arrangements of white lilies and hydrangeas on every surface. The kind of event where the flowers alone cost more than my monthly rent. Harold was on stage. He stood behind a podium draped in navy fabric, wearing a Brioni suit I'd seen him try on at the Greenwich tailor 3 years ago. Diane was at the front table in a black Valentino dress, her hair swept up, diamond studs catching the light. Preston sat beside her, looking the way Preston always looks, like he was already thinking about his next meeting. The master of ceremonies, a city councilman, was mid-introduction. A philanthropist, a visionary developer, and above all, a devoted family man, Harold Andrews. Applause. Standing ovation from the front tables. Harold took the mic. He thanked the foundation. He thanked his beautiful wife Diane. He thanked my son Preston, who will carry the Andrews name forward. He gestured broadly, magnanimously, the way men like Harold gesture when they believe the room belongs to them. Then he said it. This development project is built on land and assets that have been in my family for decades. Everything I have, I built with my own hands. I stood in the back of that ballroom, next to Richard Calloway and Thomas Whitfield, and I watched my father lie to 200 people. It was the last lie he'd tell in that room. I waited until the applause faded and the waitstaff began pouring the next round. Then I walked in. I wasn't dressed for a gala. I wore a dark blazer over a white blouse, the nicest thing I owned that still fit over my cast, and black trousers. My hair was in a low bun, simple, tight. No jewelry except a pair of small silver studs that had been my mother's. I walked slowly, partly because the room was long and partly because my ribs still sent a sharp reminder with every step. Calloway was to my left, briefcase in hand, gray suit pressed. Whitfield to my right, his Hartfield trust pin catching the chandelier light. We must have looked like a strange procession, a battered woman and 2 men in suits, moving through a sea of evening gowns and tuxedos. Heads turned, conversations paused mid-sentence. I heard someone whisper, "Is that Harold's daughter?" Diane saw me first. I watched the color drain from her face in real time, a slow, descending erasure, like someone had pulled a plug. She leaned toward Harold and said something I couldn't hear. Harold turned. His public face, the one made for galas and handshakes, flickered, then reset. He came down from the podium with his champagne glass still in hand, smiling the way you smile when you need 200 people to think everything is fine. "Corinne," his voice was warm, projected. "What a surprise. I didn't think you were well enough to be out." The room watched. I looked at my father, this man who'd left me a note on a nightstand, who'd told me at 12 that I killed my mother, who'd lived in her house and spent her money and erased her memory and called it his own. "I'm standing, Dad," I said. "That's more than you planned for." The silence that followed filled every corner of the room. Harold's smile tightened. I knew that look. The one he used when a meeting wasn't going his way, but the client was still in the room. Control at all costs. "This isn't the time or the place, Corinne," he said, low enough to sound private, loud enough that the nearest tables heard every word. "Why don't we step outside and—" "You had 28 years to talk outside," I said. "You left me a note." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People set down their forks. Diane was already on her feet, crossing toward us with that smile locked in place. The one that says everything's fine, nothing to see. "Corinne, sweetie, you've clearly been through a lot." She touched my arm, gently, performatively. "Maybe you should sit down. You don't look well." I turned to her. I kept my voice even. "Diane, I'd like you to explain to everyone here why you signed for certified mail addressed to me 3 times and never told me." The hand on my arm went rigid. Diane's lips parted, but nothing came out. Harold's smile vanished. "What is she talking about?" Before Diane could answer, Richard Calloway stepped forward. He unbuttoned his suit jacket with the practiced ease of a man who'd stood in 1,000 rooms exactly like this one. He nodded politely to the tables nearest us. "Good evening. My name is Richard Calloway. I'm the managing trustee of the Margaret Ellis Andrews Irrevocable Trust, established in 2008 by the late Mrs. Andrews." He looked directly at Harold. "My client, your daughter, is the sole beneficiary of a trust you were legally obligated to disclose to her 6 years ago." He paused. "Shall we continue here, Mr. Andrews? Or would you prefer to step outside?" Harold didn't move. His jaw was locked, his champagne glass frozen at chest level. 200 people waited. He chose to stay. Of course he did. Men like Harold don't leave rooms. They believe the room will always side with them. That was his second mistake. "This is absurd," Harold said. His voice carried. He made sure of it. He set his champagne glass on the nearest table and turned to face Calloway with the posture of a man accustomed to winning disputes by sheer presence. "My late wife didn't have a trust. Whatever this woman has told you, she's either confused or she's been manipulated." "This woman." He called me this woman in front of 200 people. Calloway didn't flinch. He opened his briefcase on the edge of the nearest table, between a bread plate and a crystal water glass, and laid out 3 documents in a neat row. "This," he said, "is the original trust instrument, signed by Margaret Ellis Andrews and notarized on October 14th, 2008. This is the property deed for 14 Edgewater Lane, Greenwich, recorded with the county clerk on March 21st, 2004, 2 years before your marriage. And these are 3 certified mail receipts sent to that same address, intended for your daughter, each one signed by Diane Andrews." The room had gone so quiet, I could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass. Harold glanced at the documents. I watched his expression shift. Just barely, just for a second, from contempt to recognition. He knew those papers. He'd known about them all along. At the VIP table, a tall man in a dark suit stood up. I'd learn later his name was Hargrove, a senior officer at First Capital Regional, the bank funding Harold's $4.5 million deal. "Harold," Hargrove said, "is the property you submitted as collateral the same property referenced in these documents?" Harold's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Preston, sitting at the family table, leaned forward. "Dad, what's going on?" Harold looked at Calloway, at the deed, at me. "That house is mine," he said, but his voice had lost something. "I've lived there for 16... Living in a home and owning it," Calloway said quietly, "are 2 very different things, Mr. Andrews." The room broke, not loudly. This was Greenwich, after all, but I heard it. The low hum of 200 people recalculating everything they thought they knew about Harold Andrews. Chairs creaked as people shifted to watch. Phones appeared under tables. Someone near the back stood up to get a better view. Hargrove, the banker, walked from his VIP table to where we stood. His face was the controlled blank of a man whose institution had just been told their $4.5 million loan was built on collateral that didn't exist. "Mr. Andrews," he said, and his voice was very calm. "If the property you pledged as security is held in an irrevocable trust and was never legally yours to offer, we cannot proceed with the transaction. The deal is suspended, effective immediately. Our legal team will be in contact Monday morning." Harold's face went white. Not pink, not red, white. The blood simply left. "Robert, listen to me," Harold started. "I've heard enough tonight," Hargrove said. He straightened his cuffs. "I'd suggest you speak with your attorney before you speak with me again." He walked back to his table, collected his coat, and left the ballroom without looking back. And then Diane turned on Harold. I'd never heard her voice at that pitch, raw, stripped of every layer of cashmere sweetness. "You told me the house was yours," she hissed. "You told me the papers were handled. You told me there was nothing to worry about." Harold. "Diane, not now. I signed those letters because you told me to. You said it was old paperwork, nothing important." "Diane, stop talking." But it was too late. 200 people had just heard Diane admit in her own words that Harold had instructed her to intercept my mail. The room didn't gasp. It just absorbed. And I watched, from 5 feet away, as everything my father had built turned to glass and shattered on the ballroom floor. I could have stopped there. The deal was done. The truth about the house was out. Calloway had what he needed. But there was one more thing. The document I'd been carrying in the inside pocket of my blazer since I'd finally read it alone in that Hampton Inn 3 nights ago. "There's something else," I said. Harold looked at me. For the first time that night, I saw fear in his eyes. Not the calculating, controlled anxiety of a man losing a deal, but real fear. The kind that comes when you realize the lie you built your life on is about to be said out loud. I pulled out the police accident report. My hands were steady. I'd practiced this. "For 16 years, I said. You told me that my mother died because of me. You told me she drove out into that storm because I called her. You let me carry that. You used it. Every time I questioned you, every time I pushed back, you'd bring it up. Your mother drove out in that storm because of you. I heard it so many times I started dreaming about it." The room was absolutely still. "The police report from that night says something different." I held it up. "It says that you, Harold Andrews, agreed to pick me up from the school recital at 8:30. It says that my mother called your cell phone 5 times between 8:45 and 9:10. You never answered, because you were at a poker game on Fairfield Avenue, and you'd turned off your phone." I looked at him. "Mom didn't drive into that storm because I called her. She drove into it because you didn't show up. And then you blamed a 12-year-old girl to cover your own guilt." Harold's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Behind him, at the family table, Grant was staring at the floor, tears running down his face. Preston sat frozen, his hand flat on the tablecloth as if the table was the only thing keeping him upright. I didn't ask for an apology. I'd stopped waiting for one a long time ago. "The lie ends tonight," I said. What happened next, I didn't expect. Grant stood up. He'd been sitting at the family table all evening, silent, the way he always was at these events. Present, but invisible, the second son who never challenged Harold, who swallowed his words and went along. I'd spent years being frustrated with him for that, and years understanding it, because I'd done the same thing. But he stood up, pushed his chair back slowly, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and walked away from our father's table toward me. Every head in the room turned to follow him. He stopped in front of me, and his voice cracked on the first word. "I knew," he said, not to me, to the room. "Not everything, but enough. I knew there were papers Dad was hiding. I knew something was wrong about the way he talked about Mom, and I was too scared to say anything." He looked at me, eyes red. "Corey, I'm sorry. I should have been braver. I should have been your brother. Harold's voice cut across the room like a blade. Grant, sit down. Grant turned to face him. My 26-year-old brother, who'd never once disobeyed Harold Andrews in his life, looked at our father and said very quietly, "No, Dad, I'm done sitting down." Diane reached for Grant's arm, reflexive, possessive. He pulled away. "You intercepted her mail, Diane. Don't touch me." Grant came and stood beside me. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. For the first time in 16 years, I wasn't standing alone in a room full of people who'd decided I didn't matter. I felt his hand brush mine, just briefly, the way you reach for someone when you want them to know you're there without making a scene. A few guests near the back of the ballroom set down their napkins. One couple stood and walked to our side of the room. Then another. Not many, maybe 8, 10 people, but enough. Harold Andrews sat down. Not dramatically. There was no stagger, no clutching of the chest. He simply pulled out a chair at the nearest empty table and sat. His Brioni suit was still perfectly pressed. His hair was still in place. But something behind his eyes had gone dark, like a house where someone had turned off all the lights at once. He didn't speak. No defense, no counterattack, no, "you don't understand." Just silence. And from a man who'd controlled every room he'd ever walked into, that silence said more than any confession could. Diane was already gone. I saw the tail of her Valentino dress disappear through the service exit, her heels clicking double time on the tile. She didn't look back. Preston followed 3 seconds later, phone already to his ear. Calling who, I don't know. A lawyer, probably. Maybe his mother. The golden child, finally realizing that the throne he'd been promised was built on borrowed ground. Calloway stepped forward, spoke briefly to one of Hargrove's associates who'd remained behind, and handed over a card. I heard him say, "My office will send formal documentation to First Capital on Monday. The county records are public." Quiet, professional, final. I looked at my father one more time. He was sitting alone at a table set for 10. The champagne was still cold in the glasses around him. The lilies were still fresh. The program on his plate still read, "Honoring Harold Andrews, a legacy of leadership." I thought about saying something. Some final line, some definitive sentence that would close the book on 28 years of silence and guilt, and trying and failing to matter. But I didn't. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out, my brother beside me, through a ballroom that was already beginning to murmur again. The sound of a story being retold in real time. I thought I'd feel triumph. I didn't. What I felt was quiet, like a room after a storm. Here's what happened in the 3 months after that night. Calloway filed the formal trust transfer petition the following Monday. Because the trust was irrevocable and I was the named beneficiary, the process was clean, delayed only by the sheer volume of documentation Harold's side tried to throw at it. His attorney requested extensions twice. The court denied both. By early June, I had full control of the trust assets, the investment account, now valued at $2.13 million after years of modest, steady growth, and the deed to 14 Edgewater Lane. Harold was formally notified that his residency at the property was at the discretion of the trust beneficiary. I gave him 30 days to vacate. It was more than he gave me. First Capital Regional voided the $4.5 million development loan. Their legal team referred Harold's file to the State Attorney General's office for review of potential mortgage fraud and misrepresentation of collateral. His own attorney advised him to settle before it escalated. The legal fees alone, I was told, were projected to exceed $200,000. Diane filed for divorce in mid-May. Her attorney cited irreconcilable differences, but the timing told the real story. When the money disappeared, so did Diane. I'd have felt sorry for Harold if I were a more generous person, but I'd seen the note on my nightstand too recently for generosity. Preston called me once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, 4 minutes long, full of pauses and throat clearing, that amounted to, "I didn't know the full picture, Corinne. If there's anything I can do." I deleted it, not out of spite, out of clarity. Preston had spent his entire adult life choosing the winning side. Now that the sides had changed, his call wasn't remorse. It was repositioning. The Andrews Foundation Charity Gala was not held the following year. No one volunteered to organize it. I sold the Greenwich house in July. I know some people might think that's strange, a $3.2 million property, the place I grew up, the last physical thing my mother touched. But that house held more ghosts than memories. Every hallway, every room, every floorboard was layered with years of silence and smallness. The attic bedroom with the sloped ceiling, the kitchen where I washed Thanksgiving dishes while Preston showed off his car, the front door Diane closed in my face. I didn't need a mansion, I needed a life that was mine. I found an apartment in West Hartford, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, big windows that fill the living room with morning light. It's a 3rd-floor walk-up, which my ribs protested for the first month, but I didn't care. I signed the lease with my own name, and when I set my bag down on the empty floor, I stood there for a full minute just breathing. I went back to nursing. A new hospital, a new team, a fresh badge that says C. Andrews, RN, and nothing else. Nobody here knows about the gala, or the trust, or the house in Greenwich. They know me as the night shift nurse who's good in a crisis and brings homemade banana bread to staff meetings. That's enough. Grant and I have dinner every Thursday. We go to the same Italian place near his apartment. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, the kind of restaurant where nobody's trying to impress anyone. We talk about real things now, not the careful surface-level exchanges we used to have while Harold monitored every conversation. Real things, hard things. He started therapy in April. I started in May. And on my bookshelf next to a small jade plant and a stack of novels I keep meaning to read is a framed photo of my mother. Silver frame, simple. She's laughing, holding me as a baby, her Cartier watch glinting in the sun. For the first time in 16 years, I look at that photo, and I don't feel guilt. I feel gratitude. I spent 16 years apologizing for existing. I believed my father's version of the story, that I was the reason my mother died, that I deserved less, that I should be grateful for whatever crumbs the family table offered. I built my entire identity around being sorry. The day I stopped was the day I started living. If you're still here, and I hope you are, thank you. Not for watching, for listening. There's a difference, and it matters. I don't know what your version of that note on the nightstand looks like. Maybe it's a text that was never returned. Maybe it's a door that was never opened. Maybe it's a silence that stretched on for so long you've started to think it's normal. I don't know your story, but I know this. You are not the story someone else wrote about you. You are not the name they called you at the dinner table, or the chair they didn't set, or the mail they intercepted before you could read it. I didn't win because I was smarter or louder. I didn't win because I stormed in with some brilliant revenge plan. I won because my mother thought ahead, and because one morning in a hospital bed, holding a note that said good luck, I decided I was done being sorry. My mother left me more than money. She left me proof that someone, once, thought I was worth protecting. And that was enough to make me believe it myself. My name is Corinne Andrews. I grew up in a house that turned out to be mine. I was raised by a man who told me I was nothing, and a mother who quietly made sure I'd always have everything. And now, for the first time, that name is mine. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. I read every one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a sister, a daughter, a friend who's still sitting in that lobby waiting for someone to show up, share it with them. There are more stories in the description that I think you'll connect with. Thank you for being here. It means more than you know. My name is Dahlia Hicks. I'm 29. This is the mistake from my first marriage, my father said, glass raised, smile wide, in front of 40 relatives at our family reunion. Everyone laughed. His new wife squeezed his arm. His stepdaughter looked at her shoes. And I stood there, holding a glass of water, wearing the same smile I'd practiced for 22 years. But that night, something in me shifted. Because I had something on my phone, something I'd been carrying for 3 months, something I never planned to use, until he made it impossible not to. What I showed them didn't just embarrass my father. It destroyed the entire story he'd been telling this family for a decade. And his new wife? She never saw it coming. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now, Let me take you back 6 months before that reunion. To the day a text message landed on the wrong phone. My parents divorced when I was 7. I remember the morning my father left because he didn't take his coffee mug off the counter. My mother washed it, dried it, and put it in a box. She never said a bad word about him, not once. Richard Hicks remarried 2 years later, Vanessa Caldwell. She was younger, polished, and she smiled at me the way people smile at someone else's luggage, politely, briefly, and with the hope that it would be moved soon. She had a daughter from a previous relationship. Megan, blonde hair, quiet eyes, 2 years younger than me. Within 6 months, Megan had my bedroom at Dad's house. Vanessa said it made more sense. Megan was there full-time and I only visited weekends. Then the weekends got shorter. Vanessa would call my mother on Friday afternoons. Richard's exhausted. Maybe next week? Next week became next month. Next month became holidays only. I still tried. Every birthday, I called. Every Christmas, I showed up with a gift wrapped in paper I picked out myself. I'd sit on the edge of the couch while Megan opened her pile of presents, and I'd wait for my father to look at me the way he looked at her. He never did. The family Christmas card arrived at my mother's house every December. 3 faces: Richard, Vanessa, Megan, matching sweaters, a golden retriever. The kind of family you'd find in a picture frame at Target. I wasn't in a single one. 22 years. Not one. I used to tell myself it was an oversight. 22 years is a long time to call something an oversight, but I kept showing up. Because I believed that if I was patient enough, loyal enough, good enough, he'd eventually see me. I was wrong about that for a very long time. The day I graduated from nursing school was the proudest moment of my life. 4 years of late nights, clinical rotations, and a student loan balance that made my stomach hurt. But I did it. Top 15% of my class. I sent my father 2 tickets, front row. I wrote a note on the inside of the envelope. It would mean the world to have you there. He texted back 3 days later. Wouldn't miss it. Graduation morning, I ironed my white dress. My mother drove 90 minutes from her apartment in Richmond. We got there early. She sat in the second row. My father's seats were in the first. The ceremony started. I looked out at the crowd during the processional. My mother was beaming. The 2 seats beside her were empty. I walked across that stage, shook the dean's hand, and smiled for the camera. When I got back to my seat, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. That evening, I scrolled Facebook. There it was, a photo of Richard, Vanessa, and Megan at a college football game. Megan in a foam finger, Vanessa in sunglasses. My father with his arm around both of them. Posted 3 hours before my ceremony. He hadn't forgotten. He'd chosen. My mother found me on the porch that night, still in my white dress, mascara on my wrists. She sat beside me and said, "Honey, stop setting yourself on fire to keep him warm." I heard her. I just wasn't ready to listen. "He's still my dad," I said. She didn't argue. She just held my hand. I didn't know then that his absence at my graduation was the kindest version of what he was capable of. The cruelest was still 6 years away, waiting for me at a long table under string lights. 6 months before the reunion, my phone rang on a Tuesday night. I was halfway through a 12-hour shift in the ER, running on cold coffee and adrenaline. "Dahlia, it's Grandma." Eleanor Hicks, 81 years old, sharp as a scalpel and twice as direct. "You're coming to the reunion this July. I don't care what your father says." I hesitated. Last year, Richard told me the reunion was immediate family only. I found out later from a cousin's Instagram that 35 people had been there. Vanessa posted a group photo with the caption, "The whole Hicks family together." I wasn't in it, because I wasn't invited. "Grandma, I don't know if—" "You are a Hicks. That's not something he gets to decide." The way she said it, steady, certain, like she was reading from something older than all of us. I couldn't say no. "Okay, I'll be there." "Good. Wear something comfortable. And bring your appetite." I smiled. It was the first time in months that anything about the name Hicks made me smile. 2 weeks later, I was packing a bag for a weekend shift when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. ER nurses get spam calls like other people get junk mail, but I opened it. "Hey babe, V said Richard's gonna do the family thing again this summer. You gonna come watch the show? I read it 3 times. V. Vanessa. The family thing. The show. The message wasn't meant for me. Someone, a man, based on the tone, had the wrong number. Or rather, he had what used to be my number. The one I gave up at 18. The one Vanessa took over when I switched plans. I stared at that text for 11 minutes. Then I took a screenshot. I didn't reply. I didn't block the number. I just saved it and put my phone face down on the nightstand. For 2 weeks, I told myself it was nothing. A friend of Vanessa's, an inside joke I didn't understand. Maybe the show was a barbecue theme, and I was reading too much into an emoji. Then the second message came. Same number. No text this time, just a photo. Vanessa at a restaurant I didn't recognize. A man across from her. Their hands were intertwined over a basket of bread. His thumb was tracing her knuckle. She was laughing with her head tilted back, the way people laugh when they've forgotten anyone might be watching. The man wasn't my father. Below the photo. Miss you already. Tuesday can't come soon enough. My stomach dropped. I sat on my bathroom floor for a long time. Not because I cared about Vanessa's marriage. I didn't. But because I understood something mechanical about what was happening. This man, whoever he was, had my old phone number saved under Vanessa's name. And he was sending her messages to me by accident. Which meant Vanessa had given him my old number as her own. Which meant she was hiding this relationship somewhere my father would never look. I saved the photo. I saved the text. I put them in a folder on my phone labeled Insurance. And I locked it with a passcode. I wasn't looking for ammunition, but ammunition doesn't care whether you're looking. Over the next few weeks, 3 more messages trickled in. A selfie of the man in a hotel bathroom, a voice note I didn't play, and 1 more text. Derek misses his V. Derek. Now he had a name. A month before the reunion, I drove to Richmond to see my mother, Linda Hicks, though she'd gone back to her maiden name, Linda Porter, the day the divorce was finalized. We sat in her kitchen. Same yellow curtains. She made chamomile tea the way she always did. Too much honey, not enough patience for it to cool. I need to tell you something, she said. And I need you to hear it without getting upset. I set down my mug. Eleanor called me last week. She let something slip. Richard's been talking to a lawyer about updating his estate documents. I waited. He's planning to leave everything to Megan. The savings account, the property share from Eleanor's trust, all of it. Your name isn't in any of it. I looked at the tea. The honey was still swirling at the bottom, slow and golden. I don't care about the money, Mom. I know you don't, but honey, it's not about the money. He's erasing you, officially, on paper. And if he does it before the reunion, it becomes the version everyone accepts. She was right. If I stayed silent, if I smiled through another dinner and drove home alone, the reunion would become a coronation. Megan as the heir, Vanessa as the matriarch in waiting, and me as the footnote no one bothered to read. You can't make someone love you, sweetheart, my mother said, but you can stop letting them hurt you. I drove home that night with the windows down. The May air was warm and thick with honeysuckle, but the money wasn't what kept me up that night. It was a question. If Megan is the daughter he chose, does he even know who she really is? I want to be honest with you. What happened next? I'm not proud of how I found it, but I also didn't go looking. It was a Wednesday. I was scrolling through the messages from Derek's number, not to snoop, but to figure out if I should tell someone. A pastor, a counselor, I didn't know. And then I found the message that changed everything. It was sandwiched between a restaurant photo and a heart emoji. Vanessa had apparently sent Derek a long message, and because Derek's phone thought my number was hers, his reply showed me context I was never supposed to see. Derek had written, "Does Megan know about us?" And Vanessa had replied. The text appeared in his quoted response. "She doesn't know, and she never will. R thinks she's mine. That's all that matters." I read it 4 times. R thinks she's mine. Vanessa had always told the family that Megan was her biological daughter from a previous relationship. It was the foundation of everything. Why Richard embraced Megan so completely, why he gave her his name, why she was the centerpiece of his new family portrait. But according to Vanessa's own words, that story was a lie. Megan wasn't her biological child. She had adopted or taken custody of Megan, and told Richard the girl was hers by blood. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from the weight of knowing something that could shatter 3 people's lives. I saved the screenshot. Same folder, same passcode. Then I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and cried. Not for Richard, not for Vanessa, for Megan. A 16-year-old girl standing in the middle of a story she didn't know was fiction. I had 2 grenades in my pocket. I was praying I'd never have to pull the pin. July 14th. I pulled onto the gravel drive of Eleanor's farm outside Charlottesville at 9 in the morning. The tires crunched slow and loud, the way footsteps sound in a library. The farm was everything a Virginia postcard promises. White clapboard house with a wraparound porch, oak trees older than the county. A long table had already been dragged out to the side yard, and someone had strung lights between the walnut trees, the kind that don't turn on until dusk, when everything looks softer than it is. Eleanor was on the porch in her wicker chair, a glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand. "You're early," she said. "You told me to bring my appetite. I figured I'd earn it." She smiled. I helped her carry platters out to the table. We laid down checkered cloth, set out mason jars with wildflowers, and arranged 40 place settings. 40 forks, 40 knives, 40 napkins folded into triangles. At one point, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was softer than it used to be, but her eyes weren't. "Whatever happens today, you hold your head up." I didn't know what she meant. Or maybe I did. Cars began arriving around noon. Uncles I hadn't seen in years. Cousins with new babies. Great Aunt Patricia with her famous corn pudding and her famous opinions. Then, at 1:15, a black Lexus pulled in. Vanessa stepped out first. Floral wrap dress, oversized sunglasses, hair blown out like she was walking a carpet. Megan followed in a white sundress. And Richard emerged last, straightening his collar, placing one hand on Vanessa's back and the other on Megan's shoulder. A family portrait, walking. He passed me on the porch without stopping. A glance, a nod. "Oh, you came." 2 words, no hug. And every cousin on that porch heard them. Vanessa worked the crowd the way a campaign manager works a fundraiser. Every handshake had a purpose. Every compliment had a direction. "Have you met our Megan?" she said to Uncle Bill, steering the girl forward by both shoulders. "Top of her class at St. Catherine's. She's looking at pre-law." Megan smiled on cue, a trained smile, the kind that starts and stops at the mouth. When Aunt Patricia turned to me and said, "And Dahlia, sweetheart, what are you up to these days?" Vanessa was there before I could open my mouth. "She's a nurse, night shifts, I think." Vanessa placed a hand on her chest. "Bless her heart. If you're not from the South, you might think that's a compliment. It's not. Bless her heart is a silencer with a ribbon on it. It says, 'Isn't that sweet? Isn't that small? Now let's move on.'" Patricia's smile stiffened. D. Ruth, standing near the lemonade table, lowered her sunglasses and watched Vanessa walk away. Eleanor, from her porch chair, didn't blink. I poured myself a glass of water and said nothing. I was used to this. I'd been the background character in the Richard Hicks show for 22 years. One more afternoon wouldn't kill me, or so I thought. It was Cousin Jake who pulled me aside near the oak tree. "Hey, Dahlia, can I ask you something?" "Sure." He leaned in. "Is it true your dad's cutting you out of Grandma's side too? Vanessa was telling Aunt Carol about it last night." The water in my glass went still. Not because of the news, I already knew, but because Vanessa had been campaigning. She'd been laying groundwork, telling the family before I could. This wasn't carelessness. This was a strategy. The speech came after the brisket. It's a Hicks tradition. The eldest son stands up after the main course, taps his glass, and says a few words about family. My grandfather started it. My father inherited it the way he inherited everything, by assuming it was his right. Richard pushed his chair back and stood. The legs scraped the flagstone, and 40 conversations dropped to a murmur. "I want to talk about family," he began. He was good at this. The pauses, the eye contact, the practiced warmth. About what it means to be a Hicks. About loyalty, about legacy. He placed his hand on Megan's shoulder. I want to introduce someone, my real daughter. Megan stood, blushing. Richard listed her accomplishments: honor roll, student council, volunteer work at the animal shelter. Each one landed like a medal pinned to a uniform. The table applauded. Vanessa touched her collarbone like she might cry. Then someone, I think it was Uncle Bill, said, "What about Dahlia?" Richard looked at me the way you look at a receipt you forgot to throw away. "Oh, Dahlia," he chuckled. "She's the mistake from my first marriage." He laughed first, the way a host laughs at his own joke to give the audience permission, and they followed. Not everyone. Patricia didn't. Ruth didn't. Eleanor set her fork down with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence, but enough of them laughed, enough to fill the air, enough to make it real. Vanessa squeezed Richard's arm. Megan looked at the grass, and I stood there, water in my hand, face perfectly still, while 40 people decided that my father's cruelty was a punchline. 40 people, and not one of them said a word. Not yet. There's a sound the world makes when it stops pretending. It's not loud, it's the opposite. It's the silence between the laughter dying and the next fork hitting a plate. A silence shaped like a held breath. That's the sound I heard. The string lights blinked on. Dusk had come without my noticing. The citronella candles on the table threw shadows that wobbled in the breeze. Someone refilled a glass. Someone complimented the cobbler. The evening went on, but inside me, a 22-year-old dam was cracking. I looked down at my phone in my pocket. I could feel it against my thigh, the weight of 3 months of screenshots, a folder called insurance, and a truth that didn't belong to me but had landed in my lap anyway. I looked at Megan across the table. 16, picking at a biscuit. She hadn't asked for any of this. She wasn't the villain. She was a prop that Vanessa dressed up and Richard displayed because she fit the story he wanted to tell. I looked at Eleanor. She was watching me from her chair at the head of the table. Her eyes were sharp and bright, like 2 lit windows in a dark house. She gave me the smallest nod. Not a nod that said do something, a nod that said I'm here. I touched the edge of my phone but didn't pull it out. Not yet. There's a difference between keeping the peace and losing yourself. I'd been confusing the two for 22 years. Keeping the peace meant swallowing my name when he mispronounced it. Losing myself meant standing in a yard full of my own blood relatives while they laughed at the word mistake and I said nothing. I wasn't going to start a war, but I wasn't going to stand here and be erased. Ruth found me near the hydrangeas. I was pretending to admire them. She wasn't pretending anything. That was disgusting, she said. No preamble. Ruth Hicks Brennan didn't do preambles. She did opening statements. I'm fine, Aunt Ruth. No, you're not, and you shouldn't have to be. She crossed her arms. Ruth was 48, 5'3", and had once made a real estate developer cry in a deposition. She wore linen trousers and reading glasses on a chain, and she looked at the world like it was a contract she hadn't finished reviewing. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Did your father tell you he asked me to revise his estate plan? Mom mentioned it. Ruth's jaw tightened. I refused. Something about Vanessa's paperwork didn't add up. Dates that didn't match. A custody document that referenced a county I couldn't verify. My heartbeat shifted. I kept my face neutral. 22 years of practice. What do you mean? I mean I'm a lawyer, and lawyers notice things. She paused. I told Richard he needed to get Vanessa's documents independently verified before I'd touch anything. He told me I was being difficult. Then he found another attorney. She looked at me sideways. Dahlia, if you know something, anything, about that woman, now would be a good time to decide what you want to do with it. I met her eyes. I don't know what I know yet. It wasn't a lie. I had screenshots. I had a name, Derek. I had a message that said R thinks she's mine. But I didn't have proof in the legal sense. I had pieces of a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to assemble. I don't take sides, Ruth said. But I hate lies. She walked back to the table. I stayed by the hydrangeas another minute. My phone felt heavier in my pocket than it had an hour ago. I went inside to help Eleanor clear the dessert plates. The kitchen was warm and smelled like peach cobbler and dish soap. I had my hands in the sink when I heard the screen door close behind me. Vanessa. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, the way someone stands when they want you to know they're in charge of the room. "You should leave before the bonfire," she said. Quiet, almost gentle, the voice of a woman who'd learned that the softest threats are the hardest to prove. "Eleanor invited me. His mother is 81, Dahlia. She won't be around forever." She paused to let that land. "And when she's gone, you'll have no reason to come back." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands slowly, looked at her. For 22 years, I'd assumed Vanessa was careless, the way a person who wins by default can afford to be careless. But standing in that kitchen, 3 feet from her cold smile, I understood something I should have understood years ago. This wasn't carelessness. This was architecture. Every missed invitation, every whispered aside to relatives, every bless her heart. Vanessa hadn't stumbled into my erasure. She'd built it, brick by brick, year by year, and she'd done it with a smile so polished that no one ever thought to look behind it. "I told Richard to update the will," she said. "He listened. He always listens to me." She said it like a woman showing you the lock on the door from the inside. I said nothing. I picked up a dish towel, folded it, hung it on the oven handle. She walked out of that kitchen thinking she'd won. She had no idea I was holding her entire house of cards in my back pocket. The screen door banged shut. Outside, someone was starting the bonfire. The bonfire was Richard's idea. He loved a stage. Someone had dragged the Adirondack chairs into a half circle around the fire pit. The flames crackled and spit. Fireflies competed with the embers. It would have been beautiful if it weren't a courtroom. Richard stood again. Second speech of the night. He held a glass of bourbon the way men hold things when they want you to notice their hands are steady. "I want to make something official," he said. The chatter died. "Megan will be taking the Hicks name, legally. I've already filed the paperwork." Murmurs. A few supportive nods from people who didn't know better. Vanessa smoothed Megan's hair. "She's the daughter I was always meant to have." He said it simply, factually, the way you might read a deed transfer. And then he turned, slowly, deliberately, and looked at me. "Dahlia, I wish you the best. I really do." His voice carried that practiced sincerity, the kind that fools people who want to be fooled. "But let's be honest, you were never really part of this family." The fire popped. A log shifted. No one spoke. Uncle Bill examined his shoes. Patricia gripped the arm of her chair. Cousin Jake stared into the flames like they owed him money. And Vanessa sat behind Richard with her hand on Megan's knee, and she smiled the way a chess player smiles 3 moves before checkmate. Eleanor hadn't come to the bonfire. Her hip was bothering her, she'd said. But through the kitchen window, I could see the light on. She was watching. I held my water glass. My hand was steady. My heartbeat was not. He thought he was closing a chapter. He didn't know I was about to open one. What nobody expected, what I didn't expect, was Megan. She was sitting next to Vanessa, hands folded in her lap the way they teach you in etiquette class. But when Richard said those words, "You were never really part of this family," something moved across her face. Not triumph, not relief. Guilt. "Dad," she said, quiet, almost swallowed by the fire. "Maybe you shouldn't—" "Shh." Richard didn't even look at her. "This is a family matter, sweetheart." He patted her hand the way you pat a dog that barks at company. "Stay, good girl." Megan sank back into her chair. 16 years old, dressed in white, and disappearing. I watched her, and something in my chest loosened. Not anger, recognition. She was me. A different version, a different role, but the same production. Richard didn't have daughters. He had casting choices. And Megan was the understudy who didn't know the lead had been written out. But understanding Megan's innocence didn't change what was happening to me. Right now, in front of 40 witnesses, my father was erasing me, formally, publicly, with a bonfire as his backdrop and bourbon as his courage. Great Aunt Patricia cleared her throat. "Richard, that girl is your blood." Richard didn't flinch. "Blood doesn't make family, Aunt Pat. Choice does." He had no idea how right he was, and he had no idea how badly that sentence was about to age. The fire crackled. Vanessa crossed her legs. Somewhere behind me, I heard Ruth set her glass down on the arm of her chair. Carefully, the way you set down something you might need your hands free for. I looked at the sky. Virginia stars. A clear night. The kind of night that doesn't forgive you for what you do under it. My phone sat warm against my leg. The screen door opened. Eleanor Hicks stepped onto the porch. She had her cane in one hand and 81 years of authority in the other. She moved slowly, but nobody mistook that for weakness. The porch boards creaked under her steps like they were announcing her. She stopped at the top of the stairs, looking down at the bonfire circle. At Richard. At all of us. Richard Allen Hicks. Full name. The way mothers use them when the next sentence is going to leave a mark. I did not raise you to disown your own child at my table. Richard shifted. Mom, this isn't the time. This is exactly the time. Her voice was low, but it carried the way a church bell carries. Not because it's loud, but because everything else goes quiet. You chose this stage. Now stand on it. Vanessa leaned forward. Eleanor, maybe you should sit down. Your blood pressure... My blood pressure is fine. Eleanor fixed Vanessa with a look that could have stripped paint. My patience is not. Silence. Real silence. Not the polite kind from before, but the kind that sits on your chest. I could feel the whole family holding their breath. 40 people caught between a matriarch and her son, between loyalty and discomfort, between watching and being watched. Eleanor looked at me. That same sharp gaze, that same nod from earlier, and something inside me unlocked. Not rage, not revenge, just a door that had been bolted shut for 22 years, finally swinging open. I stood up, slowly. I smoothed the front of my blouse. I held my water glass in my left hand, steady, quiet, like a nurse walking into a code. I didn't plan a speech, but when I opened my mouth, every word was ready. Since we're introducing ourselves, I said, let me take a turn. The fire crackled between us. 40 faces turned toward me, some curious, some uncomfortable. Vanessa's knuckles went white on the arm of her chair. My name is Dahlia Hicks. I'm 29 years old. I'm an emergency room nurse at Memorial General. I work 60-hour weeks. I've held people's hands while they died and told their families in the hallway. I let that sit. I've come to every reunion I was invited to. I called on every birthday. I sent Christmas gifts that were never acknowledged. I drove 3 hours each way to be here today because my grandmother asked me to. I looked at Richard. He was standing by the fire, bourbon in hand, and for the first time all evening, his smile was gone. Tonight, my father called me a mistake, in front of all of you. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. He introduced his stepdaughter as his real daughter and told 40 people that I, his only biological child, was an error he made 29 years ago. Patricia covered her mouth. Jake looked at his feet. I could leave. I've left before. I'm good at it. I paused. But before I do, I have a question. Not for my father. I turned to Vanessa. The color in her face shifted. Just slightly, like a light dimming behind a curtain. Vanessa, would you like to tell them? Her eyes widened. Or should I? 7 words. But the way they landed, you could hear the fire. You could hear the crickets. You could hear 40 people stop breathing at the same time. The color left her face like someone pulled a plug. Vanessa recovered fast. I'll give her that. 20 years of performance will teach you how to find your lines. I have no idea what you're talking about. She even managed a small, confused laugh. The kind designed to make the audience think the other person is crazy. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. No dramatic flourish. No speech. Just a woman holding a screen. 3 months ago, I received a text message. It was meant for Vanessa, from a man named Derek. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't hold it up like evidence in a courtroom. Instead, I turned the screen toward Ruth, who was sitting 3 chairs to my left. Ruth took the phone. She read. Her expression didn't change at first. And then it did. A small tightening around the jaw. A slow exhale through the nose. Richard, she said. Calm, professional, the voice she used in depositions. You need to see this. Richard scoffed. What is this, an ambush? Look at the phone, Richard. He took it. I watched his eyes move left to right, then stop. The bourbon glass tilted in his hand. A drop ran down the side. Vanessa stood up. Those are fake. She fabricated them. Her voice cracked on the last word. Fabricated. It's a big word to throw at someone when your hands are shaking. The number is still active, I said. You can call Derek right now. Area code 757. He'll pick up. I said it the way I tell a patient's family the test results. Clear, simple. No editorializing. Richard looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at the phone. The bonfire popped. A shower of sparks rose and vanished. Nobody moved. Richard's voice came out low, the kind of low that happens when a man is choosing between fury and collapse. Who the hell is Derek? Vanessa didn't answer the question. Instead, she pivoted, the way she always pivoted. She turned to the family, tears already forming, arms open in appeal. She's doing this to destroy us. Can't you see? She's always been jealous, always resented Megan. Richard. Ruth stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The timestamps are consistent across 3 months. The photos are geotagged. This isn't fabricated. The phone was being passed now. Uncle Bill read it and set it down like it burned. Cousin Jake looked at the screen, then at Vanessa, then back again. Great Aunt Patricia held the phone at arm's length. She'd forgotten her reading glasses, but she saw enough. The murmuring started. Not loud, just the rustle of 40 people recalculating everything they thought they knew about Richard Hicks's perfect second act. Vanessa was crying now, full tears, the kind that come with sound. This is my family. You can't take that from me. But the tears landed wrong. They landed the way tears land when you've watched someone perform sincerity all day. You start to wonder which version is the act. Eleanor sat on the porch, still, watching. She didn't look surprised. Richard turned to me. His jaw was tight. His eyes were glassy. You planned this. I shook my head. No, you gave me a reason tonight. My voice was steady. My hands were not. But that was okay. Courage doesn't mean your hands don't shake. It means you speak anyway. And I wasn't done. Because that wasn't the grenade he should have been worried about. Vanessa was still crying when she made her mistake. Fine, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand, makeup smearing across her cheekbone. Fine, I made a mistake, but that doesn't change anything. Megan is still our daughter. She's still Richard's. She almost said family, but she didn't finish, because I was already talking. Megan. The girl looked up. She was sitting rigid in her white sundress, gripping the seat of her chair with both hands, knuckles bloodless. I'm sorry, I said, softly, the way I speak to patients who are about to hear hard news. You don't deserve any of this. Then I turned to Richard. You said blood doesn't make family. Choice does. I let his own words sit in the air between us. So here's a choice. Ask your wife who Megan's biological mother is. The fire had burned down to embers. The light was low and orange and honest. Richard blinked. What? Vanessa lunged forward. Don't you dare! In her own messages, I said, Vanessa wrote to Derek, and I'm quoting, she doesn't know. R thinks she's mine. That's all that matters. I didn't shout it. I didn't need to. The words moved through the circle like a wave through still water, slow, wide, and impossible to stop. Richard turned to Vanessa. She was shaking her head. No words, just the head, moving side to side, like a metronome winding down. Megan stood up. Her chair scraped the stone. Mom, she said. One word, one syllable. All the questions in the world packed into 3 letters. Vanessa couldn't look at her. The perfect family Richard had built to replace me, it was never real. It was a photograph of a house with no foundation. I've worked emergency rooms for 6 years. I've seen people receive the worst news of their lives under fluorescent lights. There's a look that crosses their face. Not shock, exactly. More like recognition. As if some part of them always knew, and the rest just caught up. That was Richard's face. He turned to Vanessa. Is this true? She was crying hard now. Not the beautiful kind from before. The ugly kind. The real kind. Is this true? Louder. It's complicated, she whispered. Those 2 words did more damage than my phone ever could. Because it's complicated isn't a denial, It's a confession wearing a disguise. Richard sat down. Not in a chair. There wasn't one behind him. He just sat. On the flagstone. Like his legs had made a decision his brain hadn't approved. The bourbon glass was on the ground. Someone's foot knocked it, and it rolled in a lazy semicircle, catching firelight. Megan was backing away, step by step. Her white sundress caught the orange glow of the embers. She looked like a ghost leaving a house she'd just learned was haunted. "Megan!" Vanessa reached for her. The girl flinched. Actually flinched. The way a person does when the hand reaching for them has lost the right to comfort. Cousin Jenny, God bless her, was already on her feet. She put an arm around Megan's shoulders and guided her toward the house. No words, just presence. Sometimes that's enough. Eleanor hadn't moved from the porch. Her cane rested across her knees. Her face was still, but her eyes held the look of a woman who'd watched a building she'd warned everyone about finally come down. Is this true? 3 words. His whole world, in 3 words. And no one at that table could help him hold it up anymore. Ruth let the silence do its work for exactly 10 seconds. Then she stood. "Richard," her voice was the calmest thing in that yard. "As your sister, I'm sorry you're hearing this. As a lawyer, I need to say something." Richard looked up from the ground. His face was blank. The kind of blank that comes after a system crash, when the screen is still glowing but nothing's running behind it. "The estate documents you filed, the ones you wanted me to revise, were based on the assumption that Megan is Vanessa's biological daughter. If that information is inaccurate, those documents may need to be reviewed." "Ruth," Vanessa started, "you can't just—" "I'm not finished." Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. If false information was provided in legal paperwork, custody documents, for instance, that's not a family matter. That's a legal matter. The word legal moved through the group like a cold draft. Uncle Bill straightened. Patricia set her jaw. Even Cousin Jake, who'd been silent for 20 minutes, looked up. Vanessa's composure, what was left of it, collapsed. "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Vanessa." Ruth folded her arms. "The truth is—" I stood to the side, silent. I didn't add to it. I didn't stack on. The machinery of consequence was turning on its own now, and it didn't need me to push. Richard was staring at the space between his shoes, his perfect second family, his clean narrative, his escape from the mistake of his first marriage, all of it, exposed. Not by enemies, but by the truth he'd chosen not to look for. I felt no triumph, just the strange hollow calm that follows an emergency after the sirens stop. I could have left then. Nobody would have blamed me. The job was done. The truth was out. I could have walked to my car and driven home in silence. But I needed to say one more thing. Not for them. For me. I turned to Richard. He was still on the ground, but he'd pulled himself onto the edge of a chair. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Dad." He flinched at the word. "Good. I didn't come here to humiliate you." His eyes met mine for the first time all evening. Really met them. Not the glance and dismiss from the porch, not the smirk from the speech. This time, he saw me. "I came because Grandma invited me, because I'm a Hicks, because I've spent 22 years trying to earn something that should have been free." My voice stayed level, steady, the way I've trained it to be at 3 a.m. in a trauma bay when everything is going wrong and the only thing keeping the room together is the person who refuses to fall apart. "You called me a mistake, in front of everyone I share blood with. Tonight." He opened his mouth. I shook my head. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for a place in your will or your Christmas card or your family portrait." I set my water glass on the arm of Eleanor's chair. "I'm telling you this. This is the last time you get to define who I am." I straightened my shoulders. "From now on, if you want me in your life, you come to me, with honesty, not performance." I turned and walked toward the porch. Behind me, the fire crackled low. Eleanor's hand found mine as I passed her chair. "That's my granddaughter," she said, loud enough for all 40 of them to hear. Vanessa left first. She gathered her purse, grabbed Megan's cardigan from the back of a chair, and marched toward the Lexus without looking at anyone. Her heels punched the gravel like punctuation marks in a sentence she'd lost control of. Megan was already in the house with Cousin Jenny. When Vanessa reached the front door, Jenny appeared in the frame. "She wants to stay," Jenny said, quiet but firm. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked to the car alone. The engine started. The headlights swept across the yard, catching the faces of relatives who looked away. Tires on gravel. Then silence. Richard stayed. He sat in that chair by the dead fire while the family moved around him like water around a stone. Some people left with quick goodbyes and quicker steps. Others lingered. It was the lingerers who surprised me. Uncle Bill came over first. He shook my hand. Not with words, just the handshake. Patricia followed, and she had plenty of words. "Your mama raised you right, sweetheart." She held both my hands and looked at me the way nobody in that family had looked at me in years. Directly. "Cousin Jake, I always liked you better anyway." He said it with a half smile, but his eyes were serious. 3 of my second cousins, women I'd met maybe twice, found me on the porch and said variations of the same thing. We should have said something sooner. Maybe they should have, but I wasn't keeping score anymore. Eleanor invited me to stay the night. The guest room was already made up. Sheets turned down, water on the nightstand. She'd prepared it before I arrived. Maybe before I'd even said yes. I lay in that room and listened to the Virginia night through the open window. Crickets, a barn owl, the sound of an old house settling. I didn't cry, I was too tired for that. But I didn't sleep either. 1 week later, the fallout was measurable. Richard and Vanessa fought for 3 days straight. The neighbors on their street in Arlington could hear it through the walls. I know because Cousin Jake lived 2 blocks over and told me. On the 4th day, Vanessa packed 2 suitcases and moved into a hotel. By the following Monday, Richard had called Ruth. Not to apologize, not to talk about me, to ask her, in a voice she described as 10 years older than the week before, to review his estate documents again. Ruth agreed. On one condition, Dahlia's name goes back in. Not because Dahlia asked, because Eleanor demanded it, and Eleanor was still the one whose signature held the trust together. The family grapevine moved fast. Within days, the reunion story had traveled through every branch of the Hicks family tree. The version varied depending on who told it, but the core was the same. Richard's perfect second act was a lie, and the daughter he called a mistake was the one who told the truth. Vanessa's Facebook went dark. The blessed family posts, the matching outfit photos, the gratitude captions, all gone, replaced by silence. Derek, the man in the messages, blocked Vanessa's number. His last text, forwarded to me by accident one final time. "Don't contact me again." But the call that broke me open came 10 days after the reunion. My phone rang. Unknown number. Different from Derek's. I almost let it ring. "Dahlia, it's Megan." I sat down. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice was thin and careful, like she was carrying something fragile. "About any of it. I didn't know about Derek. I didn't know about me. I'm so sorry." "Megan." I closed my eyes. "You have nothing to be sorry for." The line went quiet. Then she said, "Can I call you sometimes?" "Anytime." Richard called 3 weeks after the reunion. I was eating cereal at my kitchen counter at 7 a.m., still in scrubs, home from a night shift. I almost didn't pick up. The old Dahlia would have lunged for the phone, would have rehearsed her opening line, would have hoped again that this was the call where everything changed. I picked up on the 5th ring. I didn't rehearse anything. "Dahlia." "Hi, Dad." Silence. The kind that happens when a man calls with something to say and realizes he doesn't know the words. "I messed up." His voice was raw. Not the polished voice from the reunion. Not the speech voice. Something underneath, unpracticed and rough like a muscle he hadn't used in years. "I know that." I waited. I've learned that silence, when you let it work, will tell you everything about who's on the other end of it. I don't know how it got this bad." "It got this bad because you let it, Dad." More silence. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. I thought about that. I thought about 22 years of Christmas cards without my face. About a graduation where my seat was empty. About a bonfire where 40 people learned what I was worth to my own father. I want you to sit with what you did, not for me, for yourself. Dahlia, I'm not punishing you. I'm not closing the door, but I'm not going to open it wider just because you knocked. I could hear him breathing. When you're ready to be honest, not just sorry, call me. I hung up, set the phone on the counter, finished my cereal. It was the hardest phone call of my life, and the most necessary. I drove back to Charlottesville one more time that summer. Not for a reunion, just to see Eleanor. The farm was quieter without 40 people on it. Just the oak trees and the porch, and the sound of her wind chimes arguing with the breeze. We sat together and drank sweet tea and didn't talk about Richard for a full 30 minutes. We talked about her garden, about my patients, about a cardinal that kept dive-bombing her mailman. Then she said, "You know, I was angry at you for a long time." I looked at her. Not for what you did at the reunion, for what you didn't do all those years before it. She took a slow sip. You let him treat you like an option, and every time you came back smiling, you gave him permission to do it again. She was right, and it didn't sting the way it would have a year ago. It landed like a diagnosis, uncomfortable but clarifying. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down. Virginia in August. Hot air and cicadas and that green smell that sticks to everything. I called my mother. Mom, you were right, all along. I didn't want to be right, honey. I know. We sat with that for a while. Two women on a phone, 100 miles apart, holding the same silence. I thought about what I'd learned. Not the big dramatic lesson that makes a good speech, the quiet one, the one that sits in your bones. I spent 22 years auditioning for a role that was never written for me. 22 years learning lines for a play where my character gets cut in the first act. The bravest thing I ever did wasn't pulling out that phone. It was putting it away and walking off the stage. 3 months after the reunion, I got promoted to charge nurse. My supervisor said I was the calmest person she'd ever seen in a crisis. I laughed. She didn't know the half of it. Eleanor came to visit me that October. She took a car service from Charlottesville, 3 hours each way, because she wanted to see my apartment. She walked through every room, inspected the kitchen cabinets, tested the water pressure, and declared my houseplant optimistic but doomed. Then she sat at my table and said, "This is yours. You built this." That mattered more than any inheritance. Megan started texting me every week. Nothing heavy at first. Memes, homework complaints, a photo of a dog she saw on the bus. Normal teenager things. The kind of nothing that means everything when it's new. One evening she texted, "Do you think I'll be okay?" I typed back, "I think you already are." We were building something, not the manufactured bond that Richard and Vanessa had staged for family photos. Something real, something that grew sideways, through cracks, the way stubborn things do. Richard hadn't called again. Some nights I picked up my phone and stared at his name in my contacts. Some nights I almost dialed, but I meant what I said. The door was open. He had to walk through it with something heavier than regret, and I was okay with the waiting. For the first time in my life, I was okay. I hung a new photo on my refrigerator that winter. Not a Christmas card, just a snapshot. Eleanor on my left, my mother on my right, Megan cross-legged on the floor in front of us. 4 women. No matching sweaters, no golden retriever, no performance. I don't need his call to know who I am. I figured that out on my own. If you've ever been the one in your family who was overlooked, replaced, or called a mistake, I see you. You're not a mistake. You never were. If this story spoke to you, drop a comment telling me, what boundary do you wish you'd set sooner? And check the description for more stories like this one. I'll see you in the next one.